Hello everybody for our final Kimberbell Digital Design Dealer exclusive for 2022. Today we're going to be working on the Cool as Cucumber eye mask. Now with this design there actually are two options. You have the one that has the cucumber embroidery, and today I'm going to actually be working through the one that shows the wording "Not Today." And part of the reason for that is the instructions that you have in your design walk you through step by step the images of doing the Cool as Cucumber applique. But I'm going to walk through on my video showing you how to do the other design with just using the step out or the color chart that she gives you in the page 9 of your instructions. So to prep for today, you are going to need your embroidery hoop that will fit a 5x7 embroidery design. So in the world of Bernina here, we are working with the oval hoop. We're going to need wash away topping, or what is also known as in our world here at Material Girls as Stitch 2.0, aqua film, something in that world. You're also going to need aqua mesh stabilizer for in the hoop or some sort of wash away. We're also going to need a piece of flexi foam, which if you purchased our kit is included in the kit. And depending upon the design that you're doing is going to depend upon your colors. So if you're going to do the Cool as Cucumber, you're going to need a cream, a teal, and a dark green. And if you're doing the one that has the wording on it, you're going to need whatever colors you want for your lettering. We're going to do a little bit of prep before we get started our project here. So in the instructions, if you purchased our kit, you got a 1/4 yard of cuddle, white cuddle. If you cut it carefully enough, you should be able to get 2 masks out of that 1/4 yard. She has you cut a 2" by 27" piece of cuddle that you will use for casing. We are going to fold that in half, right sides together, so that we have basically 1" by 27" length. And we're going to sew the long edge using a stretch stitch. And the reason for this is so that when we add the elastic in a little bit, you will be able to not break any of those straight stitches that you sewed. So a stretch stitch on a Bernina is going to look just like what you see here in stitch number 11. It may even be stitch number 11 on your machine. Now I like to lengthen it just slightly. The 1.9 default is a little small for specifically really going through this cuddle fabric that we have going on here. So I went up to about a 2.2 and it's just fine. So we're going to sew 1/4 inch. We're then going to be turning this right side out. And we're going to work through a couple other steps, but we're going to get the embroidery started and then we can work on prepping this casing piece. You will need to have the casing done before we get to the last steps of the design, but just as I like to multitask. So while the machine is embroidering, we will be able to work on our design. So stabilizer in my hoop, a piece of wash away. I'm going to take my green seafoam green leather. I'm going to put it away. I don't need it for this project. I'm just going to need my flexi foam and my 2 pieces of cuddle that are 4.5 by 8 for this part, and then we'll work on this casing in a little bit. If all of this dust gives you anxiety, or what we call is cuddle dust, okay? Once you've done your cutting, if you toss this in the dryer with like a wet washcloth or even a wet paper towel, you can run it for a couple of minutes. This will reseal these edges and it will stop dusting again until it's cut again. So if you're not into all this mess, it's okay. Cut it, clean it up, and throw it in the dryer for it to reseal itself, and then you won't have to worry about all that cuddle dust continuing to happen on your sewing room table. We are going to make sure we open the design on the machine that we want to use. So if you want to use the cucumber design, you can open that one. I'm opening the one that lists not today in there. So we are going to stitch the placement line for our mask. We're going to place the eye mask fabric, one of the pieces, that's the 4.5 by 8 piece of cuddle. We're going to place it right side up, completely covering that placement line. Run our placement line. I just have white thread in the machine. Now I'm going to take my white cuddle, I'm going to place it right side up, completely covering all of that placement line. I am then going to take a piece of wash away topping. So Stitch 2.0, aqua film, wash away topping, however you like. You can tape this down in place if you would like. You could pin it, and we're going to run the tack down. Now that our tack down is done, we are not going to trim this fabric. We are going to leave it alone. We're going to leave it just as large as it is. Do not do any trimming. Do not remove any of the film. If you are going to do the cucumber design, this is where you will now run the placement line. You will remove the aqua film topping away from inside the placement lines, and then you will place your leather right side up, tack it down, trim it, and then stitch your satin stitch. If you are doing the not today version, we are going to now work through stitching the letters. You could do all these letters in the same color. They do not have to be done in all these different colors if you don't like. On page 9 in that color chart, she shows you which letters are done in which color. I'm going to do them in a random color combination, kind of tried to match what she has there for design color. So my blue that I'm going to stitch first using Isacord thread is 3323, just in case you like what mine turns out like. And we're going to work through the next 4 color stops, stitching all the letters. Now, while those letters are stitching, I'm going to take the moment and turn my tube right side out. So you can use the turning tool of your choice. You could use a large straw, you could use once I get it started here. All right, there's my tube. I'm going to take a piece of elastic, or not a piece of elastic. I'm going to take the piece of elastic and we're going to feed it into this casing, either using a safety pin or a bodkin of your choice. But before I move on to that, I'm going to change my thread color. The next color that I'm going to use is Isacord 5833 for my green. And we're going to stitch the next two letters. And while those stitch, now this little guy right here is called a large easy point and turner. Completely your choice. You also could use the tube turners. Let me get my other set here. That are just like a straw that you would insert this in and then use a coordinating piece to turn it right side out through. Then I'm going to take a bodkin. This is a clip and glide bodkin. I'm going to insert my elastic. I'm going to clip it shut. And then I'm going to slide it in. I'm gonna clip this end of the elastic to the end, or pin it so that I don't lose it in there while I try to get this end out. Before we continue with that step, we're going to come back. We're going to change colors to our next color. My next color for this project is going to be Isacord 4620. And we're going to run the next color stop. Okay. Get this elastic here at the end, and I'm going to come about 1.5 inches down, and I'm going to pin it so that I don't lose it in there. I'm going to pull the elastic out here, and I'm going to slowly let it go back in. And again, I don't want it to be gathered between anywhere but in that 1.5 inches that we have. So I'm going to smooth out the fabric. Okay. Work through and make sure it's not twisted. Get my seam on the edge. Like that. So 1.5 inches from this end down, there's elastic, it's pinned, it's not gathered, and the same on this end. The elastic's at the edge, 1.5 inches down, it's not gathered. We're going to go back over to the machine here. We're going to change color again. This time we are going to go to color 1905. Now, if you are doing the cucumbers, once you have your cucumber satin stitched, you will change to the cream color. You're going to stitch the little cucumber seed in the middle of your cucumbers. And then you're going to stitch the wording, cool as a cucumber, out of your darker green. And then we'll both be in the same place for assembly. Once we're ready to go back to assembling, I'm going to suggest that you go back to white thread. And the final color stop in the word, we have our word done. It's just the little star detail over on the side. I am going to use Isacord color 1430. Last two little star details. We're going to change back to white thread for our design, and we're going to get our flexi foam out. We're going to take the hoop off the machine, and we're going to attach flexi foam to the back of the hoop. So, hoop off the machine. I'm going to take my piece of flexi foam. I'm going to place it on the back side of the hoop. There is no right or wrong to your flexi foam. I'm going to tape it in place just so I can get it back over to the machine and turned right side up and it not move on me. We're going to tack it down now using white thread and tack our design in place. Once the design is tacked in place, we are going to remove the hoop from the machine and we're going to trim the foam as close as we can to the outside edge. Now that that's tacked in place, I can take off my tape. I'm going to very carefully, so that I don't accidentally push my hoop apart or pop out the inner frame, we're going to trim just the foam as close to the edge of the stitching as you can. I like to use duckbill scissors. Just trim a few more here. Okay. We are going to return this to the machine and we're going to stitch the placement lines for the casing. Now while this casing is stitching, I would pay attention to where it's stitching because I am using the same thread. I don't want it to accidentally show. So it blends in kind of with the tack downs that are there, but we will kind of know where it's at. Now before we can move on, we need to finish our strap. So let's go back here and we're going to just look at the instructions just so you can see. So you took your 2-inch strip, we folded it in half wrong sides together, we turned it right side out. We've got that. Put a safety pin into the one end of the elastic, fed it through the tube. I got the elastic at the raw end at where we started, and I put a pin in it to hold it. If you come down about 1.5 inches, hold it in place, feed the elastic all the way through till it meets the other end. It is going to gather. It's designed to gather on you. And then you're going to pull it out far enough that you can get your safety pin off or your bodkin. Carefully let the elastic come back in so that raw edges meet here at the end. And then again, you're going to kind of smooth out 1.5 inches. So we want about 1.5 inches of no gathering so that we are able to take it over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew a 1/2 inch in from the edge so that you can see. Here we go. So 1/2 inch in, I've attached the casing to the elastic so nothing is going to move. It's all gathered. If you wanted to make sure this was going to kind of fit on you or the individual, you could wrap it around your head and see if it went from ear to ear, especially, or take a measuring tape and measure from ear to ear, especially if you're doing this on like a juvenile size. That will help, just so that you don't accidentally make it too big before we ever get started. Once we have our casing finished and we have our first set of stitching lines, our casing lines have been stitched into our face mask here, we're going to take and we're going to attach one end of the casing at a time. So we're not going to be putting the whole thing in there at one time. We're going to attach one end, sew it in, and then we will line up the second end. We're going to position the casing. End closest to you in your hoop is the end we're going to start with. And we're going to do this here with a 1/2 inch below the placement line that we stitched. So if you stitch the 1/2 inch away, if you line that 1/2 inch line up with your casing placement, you'll be at that 1/2 inch. And I am going to tape over it so that we can very easily and very carefully stitch this in place. Once it's in place, taped down, we are going to stitch it. We're going to take the other end of the casing now, line up that 1/2 inch mark with that end and tape it in place. And then we're going to stitch it. So all the excess is looped into the middle. Feel like that's twisted. So I'm going to pause for a moment and we're going to unstitch that because I feel like my casing is twisted on top of itself. Should be flipped over one. So double check that before you decide to stitch yours. Oh, I think it's twisted in the casing. So, all right, that feels better. All right. That feels better. So I'm going to back my machine up one color stop, and we're going to stitch that again. second time. Hoop off the machine. Come back over here to the table. She suggests at this point to remove all the topping from the design. I don't see a need to remove it right now. I would remove it once you get it all flipped right side out. I don't think it really makes a difference right this second. But we are going to, I'm going to leave it. And then if it doesn't work, you'll know. I'm going to come about 1.5 inches down, and I'm going to tape my casing down. I'm going to kind of push it all here to the middle, right around where the nose piece is here. And we're going to tape this down. We're going to take our other piece of cuddle, right sides together. And I'm going to tape that in place. All right, and we're going to stitch this down. We're going to stitch the bottom seam. So you'll see that this color stop is just going to stitch a portion of the design. At this point, we can take the hoop off the machine. You can kind of peel this up here. Make sure that you're happy with the way that everything is laying here. And then we can return this all back to the machine. And we're going to stitch the top seam. All right, we're going to take the hoop off the machine, and we're going to move the location of the casing so that we can stitch the bottom eye mask portion. I'm going to untape this, and I'm going to untape this, and we're going to carefully feed that casing now through the opening on the opposite side of where it was. So now it's coming out of the top hole between where the two seams were just made. I'm going to reuse some tape. Tape down that opening. We are going to return it to the machine, and we're going to watch it stitch the bottom of the mask. Now, I'm going to slow my machine down a little so that I can watch it, and I can maybe make a few adjustments if needed. A little pucker, but I don't think you'll really notice it once we turn this right side out. Design is finished. So we're going to take it out of the hoop. Not doing a real good job of keeping my area clean as I work today. Goodness gracious. I have a mess. We are going to now trim the project. She suggests 1/2 inch from the stitched line. Do not cut through this casing. We're going to come back here. avoid this area for a moment. This area will have to trim top and bottom independent of each other. And I'm not even going to trim the area between. The more that you leave here, the easier it is going to be to turn this right side out and sew up that seam. So I'm only going to trim up to where the stitching stops. Now we're going to clip some curves on this project, and you're going to clip the curves that are running around the curved area. Now I like to clip curves by folding in half and then just clipping at an angle into the seamed area, not cutting the seam that I just sewed. You could also, if you have a pair of pinking shears, you could also take your pinking shears to this area and not have to clip any curves. I may just take and cut a few little extra ones right there at the nose. We are going to very carefully turn this right side out. Do not pull on your casing to pull things right side out. This is going to tuck inside of, and you will hand stitch that opening shut. And then if you want, you can take your seam ripper this. You can also just throw it in the washing machine, and that will make that disappear as well. If you were giving this as a gift and you didn't want to spend the time picking out the insides of these, you could just take a wet paper towel, carefully iron, lay the wet paper towel on top, and then press, and then pick the paper towel up, and then move it again and repeat until this water soluble disappears on the inside. But I personally wouldn't be overly concerned. Okay. All right, let's get a hand needle and do some sewing. I'm just going to use any old needle. It doesn't have to be anything special. I'm going to use the same Isacord thread that I use to embroider with. I am going to double strand it though, so I am going to pull it and tie the two ends together, just to have a little bit more security here. And then we're just going to do the simple, thing stitch that you use to bind, hidden whip stitch. And even more hidden in this is because of the cuddle it really is truly hidden. Because the cuddle is gonna, the fur is just gonna soak up that stitching and make it truly invisible. So I'm going in one folded edge and out through the other folded edge, in the back and out the front. Maybe about 1/4 to 3/8 inch apart. Not really being super specific about it. I'm going to go just a couple stitches past where the machine started and stopped stitching, just so I can make sure that I'm all the way shut. And then I'm going to tie a knot, just like you would if you were binding. There's nothing different. I'm just going to pull my thread. There it is. There's your eye mask, ready for a nap. And as just a reminder, the 2023 Kimberbell Digital Dealer Exclusive Collection 2 registration is now open with Material Girls. There are 12 new designs that we will do each month. You will have access to a kit, as well as the design will automatically be put into your Kimberbell account at the beginning of the month. Plus, you'll get discounts and other specials that we have exclusive to our Embroidery Club members. And I will always be live, should be on the first Tuesday of the month, up on YouTube, walking you step by step through that month's project. Well, I hope that you are, you're having a good time stitching out your eye mask, and that you have joined us a few times this year, and we really, really appreciate it. And we hope that you have a wonderful holiday season and that you will come back and see us soon. Bye, everybody.